Welcome to The Sellouts. I am James Schramm of Schramm Financial Group, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, all the ins and outs of selling your business. Today, I'm here with Matt Roberts of Savvi Legal, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about his personal experiences as well as the experiences of other entrepreneurs that he has worked with.
Thanks, James. Yeah. Appreciate you having me. And we go back. Really, I think you and I, when we initially met, was when I was just trying to get started with entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And it's been a journey since then, so I'm excited to catch up and to
share it's good seeing you. It's been years since we've seen each other.
Yeah, for sure.
So.
A lot of ups and a lot of downs along the way. But just to kind of, I don't know how much of my background you know, so I'll kind of start at the top and
let's do it.
Kind of go through my journey with entrepreneurship. So it actually starts on my family's horse and cattle ranch. I grew up on a horse and cattle ranch, and my brothers and I, my sister as well, but largely my brothers and I were just kind of put in charge of this cattle ranch growing up. And it was my first experience running a business. We made a lot of mistakes, and it was didn't always feel like it was something that I was going to really benefit from, but it taught me how to work, and it was really played an important role with me actually working with my brothers on the current business that I'm doing. And my dad at the time was building a software company that ended up selling to JP Morgan. And so it's kind of this funny dynamic of my family where we're ranchers.
Yeah, I was just thinking, you lived on a ranch, but your dad was building a software company.
And so that was how he wanted to raise his kids. But in a lot of ways, I'm living a parallel life, where my wife and I, we have horses and chickens, and we're building a homestead, and that's kind of where I spend my weekends. But really, the entrepreneurship's in the blood, and so after I graduated from BYU, my main goal was to put myself in a position to start a company, and worked for a couple of years with a number of different tech companies, and then quit and gave myself a 2-year runway to start a business. And I said, if I'm not able to get this thing off the ground, then I'll take the long way around. I'll go to business school or something like that. And I spent a year just really cranking through a bunch of different ideas. And I was trying to follow the lean startup methodology, and really went through a bunch of different kind of wild ideas that I won't, burden you with right now. But the last one I did of that first year, it actually had a lot of traction, a lot of potential, and I just botched the kind of founding equity agreements because my co-founder had to walk. He had to go get a job.
Oh.
I had kids and a wife, and I didn't at the time. And but he was able to actually claim a good chunk of the equity of the company because we didn't set up proper vesting. And the irony is that my brother Dan, who was now my co-founder, he was a corporate and a venture attorney, worked with entrepreneurs, and from formation all the way through exit. And he took a couple companies to IPO. And I didn't call Dan when I was starting my company because I knew his law firm was billing $500 per hour for his time. And I knew he was also working 70, 80 hours a week. And I was like, I just don't want to burden Dan with this, right?
Yeah.
But after I, had to walk away from that company because I just had all this dead weight on the cap table. I called him. I was like, hey man, this is embarrassing, but I botched my my founding agreements. And he just kind of groaned, and he's like, listen, it's like, what you experienced just barely with me as your brother. It's like entrepreneurs, I have so many entrepreneur clients who just don't call me because they can't afford to pay the rates that my law firm is like forcing me to charge them. And he's like, I want a way to help these entrepreneurs that doesn't break the bank out the gate,
Yeah.
And so that was kind of what really led us to start our company, Savvi Legal. And we spell it wrong, SAVVI. But we started this company with the idea that, hey, we want to build a better way, a better experience that for the entrepreneur, first and foremost. We have a lot of kind of these like DIY software kind of based tools. LegalZoom's kind of the one that a lot of people know about. And a lot of founders that go through LegalZoom end up having to completely redo all their documents whenever they raise money or whenever they actually are getting ready to sell the company, they just don't work because of the quality and because they're not catered towards that business or that industry. And so we built this company with the vision that it's going to provide the best of both worlds, a software-driven experience, but with the ability to have an attorney that comes in and provides services, customization, and also the idea that we could build unique products for different industries of entrepreneurship, verticals of entrepreneurship. And so we started with focusing on kind of the venture capital space and building software tools and really tech-enabled services for startup founders. And that was kind of where we got our start. That was our beachhead, if you will. And from there, we've now expanded into other verticals of entrepreneurship. And we're really excited about that. And so Savvi Legal represents our services, really what I would call like our tech-enabled services business that works with entrepreneurs and also funds. Now we have fund administration, but we provide legal services, filing and compliance services, and then on the fund side we provide fund formation and fund administration. And the idea is giving an entrepreneur one life cycle solution from formation all the way through exit, which is virtually unheard of for most entrepreneurs that we've talked to. And we've been able to provide that and see this journey from formation to exit. And along the way, we've been able to meet a ton of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And we have over 10,000 users on the platform now. And
wow.
A lot of those are entrepreneurs. Some of them are investors as well. But I've been able to collect some stories along the way, so I'm excited to share some of those.
So your guys' documents and software, does that go like up to what level of exit? And I don't can it take somebody up to pre-IPO or what? Yeah.
So we have standard documents that can be used for even kind of standard basic exit scenarios. Yeah. But we would never recommend that anyone DIYs a financing or an exit event. Yeah. You can do really simple business formations, and we do that for LLCs, for corporations, basically any type of entity. But the idea is that you've got one place for all of your legal documents, and so that enables due diligence, and it allows you we have all of your company's information, legal information, financing information. So we're able to streamline a lot of aspects of a financing or an exit event. But we provide services. We provide especially legal services, and we always recommend that they work with someone as a financial advisor as well to pair with that.
Yeah.
But we've serviced the kind of that full spectrum of every stage of business. We have early exits, kind of growth stage exits, and we haven't had any IPOs, but we kind of emphasize that we work in private capital.
Yeah, so that's great. That's great. And so, where are you guys on the spectrum? You guys are still growing? Have you guys taken on any debt? Or you guys bootstrapped this? Or
yeah, so fortunately, because my co-founder Dan and brother, because he's such an amazing attorney, we've been able to leverage that, and we essentially just kind of built his legal practice as kind of a first step. And we were able to leverage that to finance the platform. Okay. And so we've been in a position where we haven't, quote unquote, needed capital, but it's very difficult to scale a software-based solution without capital. And so we've taken a few different avenues there. One is we've raised 2 small rounds of venture capital. One was kind of just angel investors, and another one was from a combination of strategic investors and a couple checks from institutional groups, venture capital groups. But fortunately, we've been able to maintain control of the company through that process. And I'll tell you just a really brief story where pre-COVID, I was probably one of the last cohorts of founders that went out to San Francisco to try to raise capital. The Sand Hill Road, on the ground capital raise. And one of your last guests, Brandon, I I could just hear in his voice, the PTSD from raising capital and dealing with investors.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, man, it was brutal. It was a learning experience, and I was about to accept some really bad terms, and then COVID hit, and all the stimulus financing came through, and we were able to take advantage of that. And that was really what enabled us to kind of bridge to a place where we were able to get a lot better terms on our financings. And we've been able to leverage a combination of, those small equity financings, but some debt financing. And we're in a position today where we don't need to raise capital. And it's a hard path to take, to try to bootstrap and not depend on outside capital, but there's trade-offs, right? And I would rather have to deal with like the pain of being lean than the pain of having to just wake up in the middle of the night with nightmares about your next capital raise and how you're going to do that and navigate that. I'd rather build a business than raise capital.
And how's it been working with your brother?
It's been awesome. I mean, it goes back to kind of growing up on that ranch. We'd fight, we'd play together, we'd work together, and we kind of all figured out how to navigate each other's personalities. And one of the nice things is that we complement each other. Dan being an attorney, myself, really background in business and product management. And then my other brother, Sam, is actually a really incredible software developer, and he was one of our first hires.
Okay.
And so we really consider Sam part of the founding team. And so there's three of us working on the same company, but it's nice because we have our different lanes. And I'm not here recommending that everyone work with family, but it's worked out for us so far.
That's great.
Yeah.
So what are some of the lessons learned either with your own company or with some of these companies that you've been working with, these founders that you've been working with, and kind of the experiences that you've grown and seen? Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of our own experience, is we built this service-based business on top of this software platform. And the software platform we've actually now branded to Paper OS is what it's called. And so think of Savvi Legal as kind of the first customer of Paper OS. It's built on Paper OS. Yeah. And we thought we were going to sell the service business because, we're going to just do the software company. And so we went through this whole process, meeting with buyers, and we got one LOI, and we were going through due diligence, and it was a pretty solid, really good terms for a service business, like the kind of revenue multiple that you wouldn't expect. And a lot of that is because it's built on the software platform. So it looks like software margins, Yeah. And we were kind of on the verge of accepting that deal. And then another group came in last minute and really blew those terms out of the water. And they made us an offer that was essentially one we couldn't refuse. And at least that's what we kind of thought of at the time. And so we ended up signing this other LOI, and it was this kind of surreal experience where we were at this moment where we realized, oh man, we're going to have a massive exit, at least considering where we were at as a company. And they were going to come in and buy the whole thing. And there was kind of this moment where we just kind of like all took a collective breath and started looking ahead. Like my wife and I were looking at, we're going to buy this ranch, and it's like a multi-million-dollar ranch, and had all sorts of crazy ideas we were talking through. And it's kind of this moment where you pull yourself out of the fray, out of, you're the man in the arena, and you pull yourself out of the arena, and you're like, oh man, this is here's all these things I want to do. And you realize how heavy the burden has been, this boulder you've been pushing up this mountain. And so it kind of creates this inertia, right, for the business itself. But as we went through this due diligence process with these guys, we realized that it just wasn't going to be a good fit. And I can't be too detailed about it, but for a number of reasons, we just realized that this wasn't going to be a good idea to go through this exit with these guys. And it was a moment where it's like we kind of pulled ourselves up for, out of that process, and then just had to dive back in. But diving back into it, and realize both kind of realized, me and Dan, and also Sam and the rest of the team, that we have so much conviction about what we can build this into. And this is really, when we talk about finding meaning as an entrepreneur, like we're doing something that we care deeply about. We're enabling entrepreneurship, and we are entrepreneurs ourselves. It's kind of in our blood, and we realize this is something we want to keep building, and we're excited about it. And yes, the exit would be nice, but we're cash flowing, and we're able to pay ourselves enough to where we're building homes, and we're not building mansions, but we're building homes, and we're living a great lifestyle. And so we're really living the dream.
Yeah. And
I think of Mark Zuckerberg, a quote that he recently talked about when someone asked him why he didn't sell, at a massive valuation. And he's like, he said, well, I realized that if I sold this company, I'd probably just go build something about the same type of company, because this is what I'm passionate about. And so why do I need to sell the company, And so that's something for us, is we're going to keep building this. We're going to build the service business and the software business hand in hand. And we're going to find opportunities to create liquidity, but we're going to maintain control of this thing, and we're going to cash flow. And so that's kind of our own experience. And that's just a recent thing that we've gone through.
How did you find those buyers? Were you guys looking for buyers at the time? Did you guys put yourself out there?
Yeah. So when it comes to finding buyers, I mean, my experience, this applies to raising capital as well as selling your business, is the best buyers are strategic. And so if you can find, if you're finding ways to partner with companies who are adjacent or in some ways even potentially competitive, if you have someone that might be interested in building, what you have today, if you can find ways to partner with them and to be, even if it is kind of like frenemies, where it's like, okay, we might compete in the future, or maybe some of our products overlap. Those are the best folks to come in and give you a really attractive offer. And so both of the LOIs that we were looking at were from strategic buyers that really, they weren't just looking at the revenue of the business. They were looking at the strategic value that we would add to their own business. And so that's where we had some really attractive terms. And the same goes with fundraising. That we did realize we wanted to mostly raise from strategic investors who were using the platform, leveraging it themselves. And so that's different for everybody, but I would say strategic buyers is the best option. And then you've got private equity, which you can run a funnel with private equity, and it's in many businesses it's the kind of like the only path, right? You may not have a good strategic option, and there's a lot of buyers out there. I would recommend that, depending on the stage of company, that you work with somebody that can help you run that funnel, and they can really advise you through that process. Yeah. And you do have this kind of vein of private equity that's called search funds. Mm-hmm. And a lot of entrepreneurs like selling to a search fund because it's essentially just like a single entrepreneur that wants to come in and run your company. They're not just going to gut it and, flip it or whatever. They're going to take care of your baby. And so, I have a lot of search funds that reach out to me because Savvi Legal looks like a very attractive, business for them. But if you're running your business well, buyers will come to you. But if you're really serious about selling it, you can really run a funnel on LinkedIn through someone that is a financial advisor that can help you with that process. But yeah, that's some of my
great. That's great. So about with some of the owners that you've worked with, what kind of experiences, good and bad, have you seen? So yeah, along the way, I've been able to meet a lot of incredible entrepreneurs, and I've kind of collected some stories through that process. And so maybe I could tell you a couple of stories that highlight different insights around selling your company from different founders. Sounds great. And so these are really, just kind of founder stories in their process and how, and to share that it's not always a perfect formula, right? But so one founder, he is a serial entrepreneur, and he's been able to successfully exit multiple businesses, and he's on track to having a really massive exit with his current company. And what
what I've kind of learned from this entrepreneur is the idea of being okay with a base hit as your first exit, and with kind of this idea of incremental wins as you go. And so he built a service-based business, one of the first software developer boot camps, and he was able to exit that company and have a really meaningful exit to the point that it kind of put him in a position to be really financially stable and able to just do entrepreneurship. It's not like he would never have to work, a day in his life. It was more just kind of gave him that confidence that, hey, I can just start a company and I can largely bootstrap it. And so his next company was actually a tech company. And this guy is a rare breed he's a software developer, but he's an incredible just business mind as well. And he was able to build this product that had kind of a freemium model, and he was starting to get a lot of adoption of this product. And he realized that it was going to be really hard to monetize, but he just kind of made this decision that he was going to take advantage of some PR opportunities, create a really nice kind of spike of adoption of that product and momentum. And thinking of it as it would be kind of a feature that fits within GitHub, a Microsoft-owned company. And through that process, he was just kind of talking to the GitHub folks, and they came in and made him a really attractive offer. And he was pre-revenue and had a multi-million-dollar exit. Wow. And he owned most of the company. And it was just an example of somebody that was able to leverage momentum and his network and to create this demand for this product.
Yeah. So how do you have a company like Microsoft and GitHub to come in pre-revenue and be able to offer something like that?
Yeah, I mean, in the tech world, it's a little bit unique but it comes back to the strategic buyer concept, where they're not looking at this as like for revenue. They're looking at this as, okay, this company could come in and compete with us, could disrupt us. So they're trying to take competition off the table. They're looking at this also as a feature that they would need to invest in themselves if they were going to build. And then they're also looking at the entrepreneur as a talent acquisition, right? They'd rather have him working for them than out there building a competing company. And so a lot of those kind of variables come into play when it's not, a strategic buyer is not looking at just like the revenue multiple. Yeah. And so, yeah, there's definitely, it's not something that is just a clear-cut path for every single business, but if you can find ways to make yourself look really attractive and juicy for one of these big, acquisition-heavy companies, then that's one option. And
so he got acquired.
And then he was actually, he worked for a couple of years, and then
he had to stay on?
He didn't have to stay on, but they made it really attractive for him to stay on, and he had a non-compete that he basically had to wait for that to wear off in order for him to start his next company, which was related enough that he needed to wait for that non-compete. Yeah. And so his next company, though, he was able to, at this point, really be in a position to not only bootstrap if he wanted, but he was also able to raise some really kind of initial strategic capital on really good terms, and to put himself in a position to never have to raise any more capital for this business.
Oh, wow.
And it's another software company, but he is all about like controlling his company. And I'll tell a story in a second about someone that lost control because they got on that venture capital flywheel. And so his company now is it's over $10 million in annual revenue. And this is, software revenue. And so he's going to have a massive exit. He owns, way north of 50% of that company. And so he's a really good example of just how to do this in a serial way, that a lot of folks think they need to go for the home run right out the gate, but it's okay to take kind of like these incremental wins and to use that to create momentum for yourself as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and being able to keep that control, right? And not losing that, because then you start having differences of where your investors and where you want to go with the company, and eventually a lot of times that relationship dissolves, and then you've got to either sell it to them or move on.
And that's another, I interviewed another founder that I just knew he had a story to tell because his company IPO'd without him as the CEO, and he took a picture of the company on the day it IPO'd out, and he was like on the outside looking in.
Oh man.
And they didn't invite him to the IPO, and this guy took it from zero to like really like basically the year before they IPO'd is when they pushed him out. And it's a pretty devastating story. And you see this, like Steve Jobs, getting pushed down and coming back. And I am a big believer in founder driven companies, and that the best way for a company to succeed and to reach its potential is if the founder, the visionary, is at the helm. And that doesn't mean they have to. Like, I think there's a lot of good reasons to exit and to get out. But if someone really wants to just be at the helm of that company, post IPO, I think that it's best for the company. But the incentives aren't always aligned towards that, because if you take venture capital, and this guy, he took Series A, Series Seed, Series A, B, C, D. I think there was all the way through Series D until they were ready to IPO. And at that point, he lost control of the board, and it was no longer, his company essentially. And he thought it was. And so he was making decisions as the founder.
Yeah.
And he fired an executive that the board had hired, and he didn't, think too much of it, because it's like, hey, this guy's trying to like come in and take us in a completely different direction that destroys our culture. And I won't get into the details of it, but it was essentially a CFO that was trying to really ramp down on their budget, their culture budget, which was a big part of their strategic value, was creating an environment for the employees to come. And so he let this guy go, and the board's like, hey, that's not cool. And he realized that the board was really mad at him. So he's like, well, okay, my bad. I'll make sure I get your, approval next time I fire an executive person.
Yeah.
And
just too late.
They're like, nah, man, we're gonna let you go.
Wow.
And it was just like this abrupt thing. And the feeling that, I guess the theme that I see when a CEO gets pushed out right before the IPO is that the truth is, like, most VCs are well-intentioned, but they have a fiduciary duty to their own LPs to maximize, their exit and their liquidation value. And so they're not thinking about the long-term, well-being of the company. They're thinking about, how do we maximize how we can get our money out at this IPO. And so you want to make the financials look as attractive as possible. And sometimes the founder, who's trying to look beyond that, is in the way of making that thing look really attractive. And so the company can get gutted. And so there's a lot of value to venture capital, but in my opinion, if you can bootstrap or raise just enough capital to, get you started and off the ground, that's the ideal scenario.
Yeah. That's the interesting thing about even when you're a public company or you have a lot of different investors involved in it, and you have to, like you said, these VCs have that fiduciary responsibility. And it reminds me, when I used to work for Fidelity Investments, that was one of the big things that they used to tout, is that they were a private company, mainly owned by the Johnson family. Abby Johnson was the owner at the time. And they could make decisions that weren't based off of what's going to happen to our share price, right? Yeah. So they didn't have to, when things slowed down, they didn't have to do massive layoffs. Yeah, they would lay off here and there when it was appropriate, when they thought it was the best long-term financial decision. But they weren't pressed of, hey, we got to do what's in the best interest of our shareholders constantly, right? Versus being able to say, hey, what's the long-term vision of this? I know there may be some added costs in the short term, but we know long-term this is going to be the best benefit. And that's hard to do when you've got all these different investors that, at the end of the day, this is their money that they want a return on. So
yeah, no, it's absolutely, it's a double-edged sword, raising capital. And I think that in this day and age, bootstrapping is becoming more in vogue. And there's certain industries that it's like there's not a lot of options. You do debt financing or you bootstrap. But if there's something that has scale potential, obviously venture capital is an option. But with the introduction of especially AI, these AI kind of enablement tools, it's really kind of lit up people's imagination that everyone's talking about who's going to build the first, unicorn business as a solo founder, which in my opinion is like, okay, maybe if you're, the founder of Minecraft and you build a video game that just kind of explodes or something, but it's really, you're not going to, at least anytime soon, you're not going to build $1 billion company without help.
Yeah, they're talking about, with Copilot and the ability to help you code, right? And be able to do all these different things. I agree. I think we're very far away
from that. But the point is that there's this bootstrapping used to be kind of frowned upon a little bit, at least in tech. And now it's like, nah, man, like it's a badge of honor. Oh, okay. And I've always been a little bit bashful about, we'll talk to other founders like, oh, hey, how much have you raised? It used to be how much capital have you raised? Yeah. But now it's like, hey, how much have you not raised, right? Yeah. And it's and so it's pretty cool. And even VCs like really, really value the founders that can be lean and to get to revenue and even profitability. So,
great. Any other stories? Any other experiences that you've seen?
Well, I think that an important. I'll just tell one more of a founder that is a really good friend of mine, and he's built a fully bootstrapped company, and it's a product-based business that he was able to build this to several $1 million in annual revenue, and had an incredible growth curve the first 5 years of the company. And there was a moment 2 years ago where they had their best year yet, and he had some acquisition offers on the table, and he ended up turning down those acquisition offers because he felt like, hey, I can do this one more time, one more year. And he was just kind of pushing, he just wanted to push one more year and to see if he can kind of get a better offer. And it ended up being, a regret for him because their growth leveled out, and they ended up getting kind of saddled with debt, and he has a bunch of inventory on the shelf. And there's a number of different reasons kind of that are out of his control that basically have limited his ability to grow since then. And I just saw in his eyes this like, and you see that with entrepreneurs sometimes, right?
Just like the weight of the company
there's the weight of the company, and also you like missed opportunities. Yeah. And one of the things as an entrepreneur is you can't let that drag you down. Like I've got a bunch of those myself, but he just had a moment of vulnerability where he's like, I just wish I would have sold this thing 2 years ago. Yeah. He's like, and he's at a point where it's just a huge drag on him. And he's actually has another company that's doing really, really well, which is another important point when you look at opportunity costs, because he's got this other company that's exploding, the supplements company, and but he still has this other one that's just, it has debt and inventory, and he's trying to do both at the same time. And if he would have gotten out of that other company, he'd be able to just invest his full time and attention on this other one.
So the first company, do you feel like he's not able to sell anymore, or just not for a valuation that he thinks would be worth it?
It's a good question. I mean, he just went through a diligence process that didn't really yield anything that was attractive. He definitely could sell the company and just kind of get out from at least kind of break even on it. Yeah. But the problem is if you know what was there 2 years ago, that kind of anchors you, right? If it's like, hey, this is going to be a multi-million-dollar exit, and now this is going to be just like get out of this company type of exit. And I talked to him about, would it be just better just to fold, and just walk away. And he's going to do one more push and just see if he can get this to a point where he can actually, walk away with something from it. But I don't know. There's an emotional component to selling your business that we all, if we take Econ 110, there's like, hey, there's sunk costs, there's opportunity costs. And I always thought I would be a completely rational entrepreneur, but it's very difficult to be fully rational.
Well, it becomes your baby, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. So kind of that notion of when to hold and when to fold, right? And you kind of alluded to this earlier of just kind of knowing when to sell, seize the moment. I was just talking to Sean Bingham the other day, and one of the companies that he had, he sold it and he got a good valuation, he felt at the time, and it was at the time, but he was saying that he sold kind of the bottom of the J curve, and right after they sold in like the spring, summer, it was a sunglass company, KZ, and the summer's their best time, and their company just blew up. And so the private equity firm that bought him, they even said this was one of the best acquisitions we've ever made.
Because, you don't want to hear that as an entrepreneur.
Exactly. You don't want to hear that. He obviously wanted the success for the company, but you want to make sure that you're getting paid properly for the company that you built.
Sure.
And so trying to know when the perfect time is hard, which kind of leads into something that we always talk to a lot of our companies that we work with, which is always being prepared to sell, right? Getting the company in the right position to sell, so that way when the opportunity arises, you're not in a rush.
Yeah.
You can take advantage of it. You're not going to be too late or too early and any of that things. And we also think it's just good business sense, not to constantly be trying to sell, because I think if you have employees, especially, that can kind of wear
for sure
on the company culture. But at the same time, always working on things to make your company, number one, be growing, be leaner at times, but also be thinking about, okay, what's the next step? Are we ready to sell this, or do we, kind of got two paths here? We've done these initiatives to kind of grow the company. Now, do we want to sell, or do we want to keep growing it? And kind of constantly, every 6 months to a year, kind of make that decision of what's the next step that we want to make. Have you seen any experiences like that?
Well, no, honestly, I think that a lot of times with entrepreneurs, there's a mentality of, hey, I'm just trying to keep up. And I totally understand that, right? There's times where you're just in survival mode. Yeah. But as soon as you can get to a point where you are kind of not just in a reactionary mindset, trying to keep up, you really want to position yourself in this proactive mentality and approach to always being ready for, because especially when it comes to like strategic buyers, you never know when when an opportunity is going to come.
Yeah.
And so working with the right service providers to make sure that your financial books and your financial ducks are in a row.
Yeah.
On the legal side, that's one that is a lot of times, at least that we see, that there's this scramble and a due diligence scramble on the financials and the legal side of due diligence. And we see it all too often where it actually ends up killing a deal, because the investors or the buyers are coming in and saying, oh man, there's risk here, or, it kind of bogs down the process and the turnaround time of due diligence. Yeah. And so either the moment passes or, the markets shift, whatever it is, you want to just be ready, right? So that there's nothing, if the right opportunity comes up, you can just cruise through that diligence process. And, you've got your financial reporting and your financial organization in order on the legal side as well. I
have a friend that he's a client of mine, and he's in the process of selling. Hopefully within the next week or so it'll happen. But the terms got a little worse because their legal documents their S corp wasn't set up properly, and they're having to redo the formation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's not killing the deal, because it hurts the deal. It hurts the deal for sure, because their ducks weren't in a row. Yeah,
for sure. And that's where I think a lot of founders they don't see that until they experience it, And so all too often it's like you have to go through an experience to realize, oh man, next time around, I'm going to do this right. Mm-hmm. And it really actually doesn't have to be a huge financial burden for the company. If anything, if you are neglecting a lot of that stuff, it ends up just costing you a ton of money, and potentially it hurts your terms. Yeah. In the worst cases, it'll actually kill the deal. And we've seen that a number of times as well. But so I'm just curious to know, what's your kind of checklist of, hey, what do you need to do to be ready to sell? How do you guys help people with that?
Yeah. So, we go through and we kind of try to be the quarterback of everything. So we're not an expert in a lot of these different fields, but we know enough to make sure. So we go through and we bring in the right accounting team, especially like you said, you want to make sure your financial documents are in a row. And if they're thinking about selling, we start getting them audited years in advance, right? Yeah. You want to make sure that the financials that you hand over, the P&Ls and everything, that you can stand behind that. And then there's not this, oh, well, what are all these things written off and what are all these things? And so we want to make sure that we get personal expenditures off the books as much as we can, even though it may cause you to pay more taxes up front for the next year or so. But if you can get a lot better terms later on because you don't have all these expenses that bring down your revenue or your profit. So we look at that. We take a look at kind of the formation. Is it best to be a C Corp or an S Corp or an LLC or however you have it set up? What's kind of the best formation? And then we try to take a look at, okay, what kind of buyer do you want? Do you want just a pure financial buyer? What's your strategy? Do you just want out? Do you want to keep working in the business for a while? Yeah. Do you want a strategic buyer that's going to help you grow? And so maybe you only want to sell, a third or maybe half. Maybe you do sell half the company, but knowing that, hey, in 3, 4, 5 years, we're going to hopefully be able to sell for twice or 3 times as much by bringing in the right strategic buyer. So then we kind of, we go through the legal side, the financial side. Okay, what's your purpose? Like, what do you want from this company going forward? And making sure that your personal goals align with the business goals.
Love it.
And then making sure that all the partners kind of have that same thing too. Because sometimes I interviewed somebody, and I've seen it as well with a company, with one of our clients, that one of the partners didn't really want to sell, but one of the other partners was ready to get out. And trying to find a number that they could agree upon, it was just a waste of everybody's time, because we brought in a financial buyer, and it was high enough for one of the partners. It was not nearly high enough for the other partner. And we spent months and months and lots of money trying to go through this due diligence process, only to find out that one of the partners like, we can't, this isn't good enough for me. I'd rather keep working, because it was a good cash flowing business. So he's like, why get out if I'm still cash flowing, quite a bit? And the valuation just wasn't enough. They were, relatively young. They weren't ready to retire per se. So we kind of go through all those different things and just make sure that, hey, the business is ready. So we'll bring in the right partners. And we just, our goal is to make sure that our clients get the biggest multiple, or not even always that, but what they're looking for in their exit. I got another client that it's always been a family-run business. The grandfather started it, and then the father, and now the daughter's running the business. And she hates the word sell. We've talked about, like, if I ever say the word sell, it's like it's a trigger word for her. I am not selling this business. Yep. But she knows that eventually, the business is going to sell, or it's going to have to be passed on. And she wants it to stay a family-run business. And so we're looking at doing an ESOP, just because that's the way to make sure it has kind of that same company culture that they have, and the executives can still kind of maintain control of the company with running the company through an ESOP and a board. But everybody's different, right? And so we just got to make sure that all of everybody's values align and the financial incentives align, and make sure all the ducks are in a row. But
love it. Yeah, I mean, I think that's so critical, and it's really hard to. I would never recommend that a founder try to navigate that process without the right advisors through that experience.
Yeah, all the right. We try to put together a financial team. We have the right CPA. Like, a lot of times a company gets by with a mediocre CPA, right? And that's fine. But we need to make sure we have the right financial team, whether you have a really, really on top of it CFO that's done this before, or we bring in the right accounting team that has helped other companies. But you need to have somebody that's done it before. And then trying to make sure, right, even to the end of after the transaction, you want to have the right estate attorney in place. Oh yeah. If you sell for big enough, you got a big estate problem. You need
to be on top of that.
Yeah. And there's certain things you can do ahead of time
for sure
to minimize the taxable situation, not even just for you personally, but for your estate.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that fortunately my co-founder, he's a really incredible attorney that he understands not just, the right way to do things legally, but also like the tax side of corporate transactions. And so he's put us in a really good position from a tax standpoint with qualified small business stock as an example. And that's one of those things where if you can get on it early enough, something like qualified small business stock can be a huge, huge benefit and can save you millions of dollars of taxes in an exit event. And so if anyone's listening to this podcast and doesn't know what that is, talk to James, because that's something that you would regret not, and it's a 5-year process to start that. And so you want to do that 5 years before you exit.
Yeah.
If you aren't already on that path and structured for that, you need to start it now, because for us, as we were considering these different exit opportunities that we walked away from because we wanted to maintain control of the company, I was realizing, man, I'm actually going to pay almost no taxes on this exit.
That's great.
And it was a pretty cool feeling.
Yeah.
And
sure.
Whenever we do sell equity, it'll probably be secondaries. So we'll sell shares, but maintain control of the company, and that'll be a huge benefit to us, when that time comes.
That's great. Any other life lessons learned through these? Anything that we missed?
The last thing I'll say is when you talk about exiting a company, it's not just strictly a financial decision, right? Yeah. I mean, you've got mental health of the founder, you've got your family dynamic, and you see founders who, like, their families are entrepreneurship has a tax on the founders,
on just people around you as well.
and it's a tax that's like largely unseen in terms of it's a lonely experience. It's a journey where you have to maintain this like facade in many cases of like kind of a PR facade. Because if you're going to raise capital or hire employees or sell to customers or sell your business, you can't always be completely transparent about all of the challenges that you're going through with a business or as an individual. Because in many cases, you are the business. Like it's hard to separate you or yourself from that. Yeah. And so my experience with going through this journey so far is just to recognize, to be willing to step back and recognize where I'm at in terms of my mental health. And I've dealt with anxiety through this process, and it's kind of highlighted some of the stuff that I didn't realize I was dealing with. And so I would just encourage any entrepreneur that's going through this experience to build a community. And so for me, building a community of other founders that are going through similar experiences was important. But also to recognize when you need to either create space for yourself to kind of to heal, or if you need professional help. I've even met with a therapist that I was always anti-therapy before going through this process.
It's kind of lost its stigma a little bit,
which
is
has
good.
Lost its stigma, but that was so huge for me. Yeah. In fact, that was, I think, a large reason why I was able to get married, because I was dealing with this shame mentality of like, hey, I can't get married until I get this all figured out. I don't want to bring someone into this mess, and was able to kind of push through that. And so I would just say that recognizing where you're at as an individual and your own health is really important. It's not just about maximizing financial outcomes. It's also, this is about you and your personal well-being, your journey, your life journey. And if this company's no longer, lifting you and helping you grow personally, if it's just a drag on you, financially, mentally, spiritually, however you want to look at it, you've got to kind of see that and understand it with clear eyes. But it's an experience I wouldn't trade for anything, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful wilderness, that you go through as an entrepreneur. So,
well, thanks for coming in, Matt. I appreciate your time. Where can people learn more about Savvi Legal?
So, people are welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. I don't spend too much time on other social media platforms, but I'm there on LinkedIn, Matt Roberts, and Savvi.legal, SAVVI.legal is our site for entrepreneurs. And if anyone's trying to build solutions for entrepreneurs, or if you're a fund manager, paperos.com is the place to find us, and we provide solutions for those folks too.
Sounds good. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks, James. Appreciate it having me.
You're welcome. Investment advisory services offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors, Inc., Schramm Financial Group, is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services. Any opinions of those are of the speaker and not necessarily those of Raymond James. This material is being provided for informational purposes only and is not a complete description, nor is it a recommendation. There is no guarantee that these statements, opinions, or forecasts provided will prove to be correct. Investing involves risk, and you may incur a profit or a loss regardless of strategy selected. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Prior to making an investment decision, please consult with your financial advisor about your individual situation. Raymond James is not affiliated with any guests on this podcast.